Have you ever wondered why some homes seem to carry peace while others feel heavy, confused, even oppressed? There is a hidden law, a principle, a mystery woven into creation, waiting to be discovered. Something as simple, as common as salt can shift the very atmosphere of your life. But hear me carefully. It's not about superstition. It's about revelation. And when you understand where and why it must be placed, everything changes. Shall we uncover this secret together? Salt. It looks so ordinary, doesn't it? Just a small crystal, easily overlooked, easily dismissed. But do you know that from the beginning of time, salt carried a hidden power, a divine symbolism? It was never just for taste, never just for preservation. Salt represents purity. It represents covenant. It represents something sacred. And when you bring it into your home with understanding, it becomes more than a kitchen ingredient. It becomes a spiritual weapon, a silent protector, a symbol of alignment with divine order. Now listen carefully, because this is not about ritual without meaning. Salt was used in ancient times to seal covenants, to purify offerings, to signify that something was set apart. When you place salt with intention, you are making a declaration. This house, this space, this atmosphere belongs to peace, belongs to blessing, belongs to light. Darkness cannot stay where light has been declared. Negativity cannot dwell where purity is established. And yes, even unseen forces respond when a symbol of divine order is present. But here's the key. It's not the salt itself that works wonders. It is the meaning you attach to it, the faith behind the action, the understanding of the principle. When you treat your home as sacred, when you mark a corner with something that represents purity, you shift the energy, you shift the environment. You are saying to every force that listens, this home is not ordinary. This home is covered. This home is set apart for peace, for provision, for protection. But why the corner? Why not the center? Why does placement matter so much in the spirit? There's a reason, a mystery that few ever think about. Because the corner is more than just a space. It represents something deeper about boundaries, about entry points, about hidden gates in your atmosphere. And if you understand the power of that sacred corner, then what happens next will surprise you beyond what you can imagine. Are you ready to discover why the place you choose can either open the door to blessing or leave it shut? Now, why does the corner matter more than you think? Why not just place the salt anywhere in the house? Because in the unseen realm, placement speaks. Corners are symbolic. They are convergence points. They represent boundaries. They mark the meeting place between two walls, two directions, two dimensions. When you stand at a corner, you are standing where things intersect. It's a hidden gate, a threshold, where movement begins and ends. Throughout history, people understood that corners were not random spaces. Even in sacred temples, the corners were anointed, the corners were marked, the corners were strengthened. Why? Because whatever is in the corner influences the entire structure. What you allow in the corner determines what flows through the whole house. So when you place salt there, you are not just decorating a spot, you are spiritually sealing the boundary. You are declaring that no corrupt force, no hidden negativity, no silent intruder will have access beyond this point. Think about it. The enemy never attacks openly at the center. He comes through the edges, the unnoticed places, the neglected spaces. Corners are symbolic of the unnoticed places people ignore. But in the spiritual realm, nothing is hidden. The corner is a gate, and what you allow in that gate can either bless or burden your entire household. So when you choose a corner intentionally and you place something that symbolizes purity, covenant, and preservation, you are sealing your home with a silent but powerful declaration. But there's another layer to this. The corner doesn't just protect, it amplifies. It carries memory. It carries the atmosphere of what you put there. So if you fill it with neglect, it multiplies chaos. But if you fill it with faith, it multiplies peace. That's why the corner matters more than you think. It's not just about space, it's about spiritual influence. But even after choosing the right corner, there's one more thing you must understand. Because placement alone isn't enough, there is a deeper meaning behind the act itself. Something that connects salt to ancient wisdom, to covenant, to divine favor. And if you don't know that meaning, you may miss the true power entirely. Shall we go deeper? Salt has always been more than seasoning. It is a symbol, a message, a covenant. In ancient times, whenever two parties entered into a binding agreement, they would share salt. Why? Because salt represented permanence. It cannot rot, it cannot decay, it cannot lose its essence. So when salt was exchanged, it meant this covenant will not be broken. This promise will not be erased. Salt became a witness of loyalty, of purity, of unshakable agreement. Even sacred offerings were sprinkled with salt. Not because God needed flavor, but because salt meant that what was offered was preserved, purified, set apart. It was saying, this is pure, this is protected, this is sacred. And in the same way, when you bring salt into your home, it is not just an object, it is a declaration. It says, this house is in covenant with peace. This house is aligned with purity. This house is preserved from corruption. Do you see it now? Salt resists decay. It stops corruption. It preserves what would otherwise spoil. That is why, in the spiritual sense, it represents a force that holds back what is destructive. When you place it in the right place, with the right understanding, you are speaking a language the unseen realm recognizes. You are saying, decay stops here, confusion stops here. But salt is also a reminder. It reminds you of your own responsibility to keep the atmosphere clean, to keep your thoughts pure, to keep your household in order. It is a physical symbol of a spiritual reality. You cannot allow bitterness, anger, or negativity to grow where salt has been placed as a covenant, because salt speaks of commitment. It speaks of purity that must be maintained. And yet, even with all this meaning, salt has another dimension that many overlook. It doesn't just preserve, it influences. It changes the flavor. It changes the atmosphere. It adds what is missing. It enhances what is already good. So what does that mean for your home, your life, your destiny? Because when salt begins to influence your space, something shifts in the unseen. And that shift, it's what opens the door to favor, to blessing, to unexpected breakthrough. Are you ready to discover how? When you place salt with intention, something begins to shift. Silently, yet powerfully. Atmospheres are not empty. They carry energy, they carry memories, they carry unseen influences that shape how you feel, how you think, even how you live. Have you ever walked into a room and felt heaviness, tension, confusion without anyone saying a word? That is the weight of an atmosphere. And just as darkness can linger in a place, peace can also be invited in. Salt is a key that unlocks this shift. Salt, when placed with understanding, becomes more than a symbol. It becomes a point of contact, a spiritual marker. It announces, This environment is purified. This space is preserved. This home is not open to confusion or oppression. It's a silent statement to the unseen realm. You may not hear it, but atmospheres respond. They respond to intention. They respond to symbols of divine order. And salt has always been one of those symbols. Think about it. Salt absorbs, it draws out what doesn't belong. In the physical, it draws out moisture, impurities, and preserves what is good. In the spiritual, it mirrors the same principle. It absorbs what is toxic. It repels what is corrupt. And it protects what is valuable. When placed in your home, it doesn't just sit there. It works silently, aligning the energy, cleansing the space, guarding the atmosphere. But here is the deeper truth. It is not the salt alone, but the faith behind the act that activates the change. It is the declaration you make when you set it in that sacred corner. You are saying, peace lives here, blessing flows here, protection surrounds here. And just like that, the unseen begins to shift. The heaviness lifts, the confusion clears. The home feels lighter, warmer, more lined. But here's where it becomes even more powerful. When the atmosphere is purified, it doesn't just affect the space, it begins to affect you, your thoughts, your emotions, your decisions. They all start to align with clarity and peace. And when you shift, everything connected to you shifts as well. But what happens next? When a purified atmosphere begins to attract what you've been waiting for, that is the next layer of this mystery. Shall we uncover it? There's a wisdom, an ancient wisdom, hidden in the simplest of things. Wisdom that generations before us understood, but many have forgotten today. Salt is not just a mineral you find on your table. It is a key that unlocks principles that are as old as creation itself. It carries a message of preservation, of covenant, of influence, but it also carries something even greater, a connection to divine order. When you use it with understanding, you are tapping into a stream of wisdom that transcends time. From the beginning, salt was known as a purifier, a preserver, a sign of unbroken agreement. Ancient cultures would not make a vow, would not seal a covenant without salt being present. It was a way of saying this bond cannot be corrupted. This promise cannot be erased. Even in sacred texts and rituals, salt was commanded to be added to every offering, because it symbolized that what was given was pure, lasting, unchanging. Can you see the depth of this? It was never about superstition, it was about alignment with a higher principle. When you bring that same understanding into your home, you are not performing a meaningless act. You are stepping into the same ancient wisdom that kept families, communities, and even nations under protection and blessing. You are declaring, this household is preserved, this atmosphere is covered, this family is aligned with peace and divine order. And when you honor that wisdom, you release something powerful. Favor begins to flow, clarity begins to come, unseen barriers begin to break. But remember, wisdom always carries responsibility. It is not enough to know the act. You must understand the heart behind it. Salt reminds you that just as it preserves and purifies, you too must preserve and protect the atmosphere of your life, your thoughts, your words, your actions. Because when wisdom is applied with intention, it multiplies blessing. And yet there is another level still. Salt does not only purify and preserve, it influences, it transforms what it touches. It changes the taste, it changes the experience, it changes the outcome. But what does that mean for your life, your destiny, your future? Because When salt begins to influence beyond the physical, something extraordinary begins to manifest. Are you ready to see what that is? Salt carries a silent force, a power that does not shout, yet it cannot be ignored. When it is placed with understanding, it becomes a shield, an unseen barrier, a quiet guardian of your home. It blocks what does not belong, it repels what is harmful, it resists what seeks to bring decay. Just as salt in the natural preserves food from rotting, in the spiritual, it symbolizes the preservation of peace, the protection of purity, the safeguarding of everything valuable within your space. Have you noticed? Salt never asks for attention. It works silently, yet its impact is undeniable. In the same way, when it is placed with intention, it begins to influence the unseen atmosphere of your home. It pushes out hidden negativity. It resists dark energies. It clears pathways for favor to flow. You may not see it with your eyes, but you will feel it in the peace that enters, in the clarity that comes, in the way your space suddenly feels lighter, calmer, more aligned. Salt does something else. It creates a boundary. It tells every unseen force, this far and no further. It marks your home as covered, protected, untouchable. Just as in ancient times warriors would mark territories to claim ownership, salt becomes a spiritual marker. A silent yet firm declaration that this house is sealed, this family is guarded, this environment belongs to peace and not to confusion. But here is the mystery. When you align your faith with this action, the effect multiplies. It is not just salt sitting in a corner. It becomes a symbol that carries meaning, a reminder of divine order and covenant. And everything in the unseen realm recognizes and responds to that. Protection is not only physical, it begins in the spiritual. And salt, though simple, speaks a powerful language in that dimension. But there's more, because protection is only the beginning. Once the space is guarded, something else is allowed to flow freely. Something begins to be attracted into that atmosphere. Something you have been waiting for, hoping for, praying for. What is it that salt begins to draw into your life when the atmosphere is cleared? That is the next mystery we are about to uncover. Every home carries an atmosphere, but not every home carries the same presence. Some spaces feel heavy, restless, even chaotic, while others feel light, peaceful, and full of warmth. What makes the difference? It is not only the people inside, it is the spiritual foundation, the sacredness of the space itself. When you intentionally set apart a place in your home, even just a small corner, it stops being ordinary. It becomes a sacred space, a meeting point between the natural and the spiritual. Salt, when placed in such a space, becomes more than a symbol. It becomes a declaration that this home is not random. It is not just a shelter made of bricks and walls. It is a dwelling place of peace, a sanctuary of blessing, a refuge where divine favor rests. And when your home carries that kind of sacred atmosphere, it begins to reflect in every part of your life. You think clearer. You rest deeper. You feel an unexplainable calm, even when chaos tries to knock at your door. Do you know why sacred spaces are so powerful? Because they draw what they represent. A space dedicated to purity attracts purity. A space aligned with peace attracts peace. A home that honors divine principles attracts divine favor. It's not about superstition. It's about alignment. What you set apart becomes a magnet for what you desire. And just like that, the sacred corner you marked with salt begins to radiate its influence into the entire home. But there is also a hidden spiritual law here. When you honor what is small, it multiplies. When you set apart even a small corner for a sacred purpose, the impact doesn't stay confined, it spreads. Soon the peace that starts in that corner fills the living room. The clarity that begins in that corner enters your decisions. The blessing that rests in that corner begins to overflow into your finances, your relationships, your future. But what happens when such a sacred atmosphere not only protects, not only preserves, but actually begins to attract provision, favor, and opportunities you never imagined? What happens when that sacred space becomes a gateway for increase? That is the next mystery we are about to unfold. When the atmosphere of your home shifts, when the space is purified, protected, and aligned, something extraordinary begins to happen. It starts to attract. You see, a clean and sacred atmosphere is like fertile soil. It draws what is good. It invites what is needed. It magnetizes favor. Opportunities you once struggled for suddenly find their way to you. Peace opens the door for clarity. Clarity opens the door for wise decisions. And wise decisions open the door for provision. It all begins with the unseen, but manifests in the seen. Salt in that sacred corner becomes a reminder, a declaration that this home is a place where blessings are welcomed, where lack cannot remain, where confusion cannot stay. It tells the atmosphere only what aligns with peace, with abundance, with divine order is allowed to enter here. And when your home becomes that kind of space, even people can feel the difference. They walk in and sense the calm. They enter and feel the warmth. And what you may not realize is that this same energy begins to call forth opportunities, connections, and resources that align with that peace. But here's the deeper truth. When you live in a space that is purified and set apart, you change. Your mind becomes clearer, your spirit more focused, your faith stronger. And when you change, your decisions change, your actions shift, you move differently. And because you move differently, you attract different outcomes. Do you see how this works? It's not magic, it's alignment. The salt is not the power, it is the reminder of a principle that says when you create order, when you honor sacredness, blessing will always respond. So the question is, are you willing to treat your home as a sacred space? Are you willing to align your heart, your thoughts, your atmosphere with peace and purity? Because the moment you do, you will begin to see doors open that were once shut. You will experience favor you never imagined. You will witness provision flow in ways you didn't expect. And remember, it all begins with the smallest act of faith. In the smallest corner of your home, speaking to the largest realms of your destiny. What you do in the natural echoes in the spiritual, and what echoes in the spiritual always returns, multiplied in the natural.